All right. Hello and welcome back to the Fit 40 podcast, where we simplify exercise and nutrition for busy people over 40 so they can improve their health and feel amazing. I'm your host, Brian Fitzsimmons, certified personal trainer and nutrition coach for people over 40 since 2015. And today we are going to answer the question, are low carb diets bad after 40? And we're going to talk about when they help and when they can hurt, because honestly, nothing that you say, like, is this good or is this bad? It's almost never, yes, it's good or yes, it's bad. It really depends on the context and the nuance, which is what we always provide here. So sit back, listen, enjoy. We're going to go over it in detail. But before we do, make sure to hit that follow or subscribe button wherever you're watching or listening, so that way you don't miss another episode going forward, because we drop episodes like this on the weekly and I won't fall off like some of your favorite podcasts might have lately. So let's get into it. All right. Now, are low carb diets bad? Okay, let's start with the downsides, because I don't think that they get talked about enough, because when you hear low carb, all you hear are benefits. And that's one giant red flag, because if somebody is talking about, oh, it does all these awesome things, all these great things, but never, ever remotely mentions anything possibly negative about it, you know they're a fan, not a source of good information. Because like when you go to the doctor and they say, oh, this is a medication that I think you should take, they don't say it's the best, it's the greatest thing ever, it's going to be the best thing ever for you, without also saying, like, there are side effects, like this can happen, that can happen. We want to keep tabs on this metric so that way you get a full scope and you have a proper risk and benefit discussion where it's like, okay, is this worth it for me? Which is what we're going to talk about here. So let's talk about the downsides. When you go low carb, one of those immediate things that people find when they just jump right in and they're like, I'm cutting out all carbohydrates, is sometimes they'll experience what's called a keto flu. Now, this is short term, and if you suck it up, you can get through it. But that initial point where you go low carb, it will, or it can produce a keto flu, where you feel flu-like symptoms because you're now not getting the amount of electrolytes that you need to sustain like a healthy version of yourself. So when it comes to the electrolytes that we're talking about, like not just sodium and potassium, like what we get in Gatorade or whatever, but there's multiple different electrolytes that we want, like calcium, magnesium, things like that, that come in carbohydrates. So we want to make sure that we are accounting for that, and we're not just going cold turkey and experiencing these negative effects when we don't necessarily need to. And then what can also happen too is reduced performance, because carbs are a fuel source. Like, if you've ever seen, what's his name? Was it the Fall Guy? But I can't believe I'm spacing on the name right now. My biggest pet peeve is when there's a podcast and people are like, I can't think of that guy. And I always know who it is, but he's like, your brain runs on glucose. Like, you need carbs. He's right. You need carbohydrates if you want to do your absolute best when it comes to performance, because you have all these mechanisms in your body that allow you to use carbohydrates as a fuel source when it comes to working out, doing your runs, or whatever it is, whatever activity it is that you're doing. Otherwise, you're just kind of leaving most of the gas tank empty. And that's not like right or wrong. Like, you can still produce pretty good effects from exercise without using your full tank of gas per se. But at the end of the day, if you want the best results, you want to get the best possible outcome, carbs should be in the mix. And a lot of people downplay that because they're super duper fans of low carb, because that's how they prefer to do it. But like, let's call a spade a spade. If you're operating with half a gas tank, you're not going to outperform somebody that has a full gas tank. You're just going to run out of gas sooner. Along with that, if you're not doing it properly, like if you jump into low carb and you fall into one of these camps where they push really fatty cuts of meat, cheese, like heavy cheese consumption, butter, that's going to increase your saturated fat intake. And we know without a shadow of a doubt, when your saturated fat intake goes up, so does your LDL cholesterol, so does your triglyceride levels. And when those levels are elevated, you are at an elevated risk for an early cardiovascular event. Okay, you're at an increased risk for a heart attack or something in that ballpark, because we just know when it comes to those certain markers, you want them to be low to improve your cardiac risk. Now, at the end of the day, it's a risk. Like, yes, are there people who can get away with super duper high levels? And are those the people you're probably hearing from on social media? Absolutely. but the overwhelming majority will see negative effects from this. If you don't believe me, one of the biggest camps right now is carnivore. There is literally a page called Carnivore Cringe on Instagram, or I think they're elsewhere too, but mainly on Instagram. And all they do is post up these negative impacts that people are experiencing from going full on carnivore. Like really bad things that happen with their health, like early heart attacks, having strokes, having these digestive issues and things like that. And you don't want to be in that camp of people and play the odds that they're playing, or at least I wouldn't want to. It really just comes down to, do you want to be in the camp where you're more likely to not have that stuff happen, or the one that's less likely to have that stuff happen? Next is, when it comes to carbohydrates, you become scared of them. Like you're, oh my God, I can't even look at a carb without gaining 5 pounds. And that narrative really hurts you in the long run, because it turns into this never ending, like horrible relationship with carbohydrates, with the scale, with the process of trying to get in better health, in better shape, burn body fat. And you don't want that cycle hurting you in the long term, because if you're constantly on and off this wagon when it comes to, oh, I ate a carb, I totally failed. Like, what happens after that? When we feel like we're failing, we act like a failure. And what do failures do? They stop giving a shit. They start eating way more than they should. They give in to every little impulse and they say, why even bother? And we don't want to fall into that category of people, because that's a label that is only going to hurt you. It's not going to serve you. So when we are able to have carbs in the diet and say, oh, I had carbs, but it wasn't the most ideal carbs, but I mean, carbs are allowed here, so I'll just make sure to make a better choice next time. That's a much more healthy relationship. So, I mean, you can not have to deal with all that stuff, but it is one of those things that a lot of people do end up dealing with when they go low carb, because it's not this positive journey of, I'm going to go low carb for all of the benefits, which we're going to get into in a sec. I promise. I won't just shit on low carb. Like, a lot of people don't go at it for just the benefits, and they're like, oh, I'm going to experience this new way of eating. Maybe I'll pick up some good habits and then I'll come back to balanced. It's no, carbs are the problem. They're the devil. They're evil. They're the source of all my issues, and I got to get rid of them. And that is a narrative that's not going to serve us. So you definitely don't want that to be you. And then also, to top that all off, not only are we at a higher risk for cardiovascular events, if you are in that camp of people who doesn't get enough fiber, because fiber comes from carbohydrates. And if we're not having fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, seeds, if we're not getting those things in the diet and we don't get enough fiber, then that also increases risks for some cancers, like colorectal cancer is the big one. And that one's on the rise right now. Go figure, because of freaking carnivore and keto that never go away. Okay. This is the stuff that really can hurt you in the long run if you opt to do low carb the wrong way. But let's talk about the right way. Okay. Benefits of low carb. There are also benefits. Okay. So for example, if you're somebody who does really struggle with overeating on refined carbohydrates, like you eat all those bad carbs, I air quoted that for anybody listening and not watching, because there's no such thing as a good or a bad carb. They just serve different purposes. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But if you're somebody who struggles with eating the right amounts, or just eating too many like cakes, pastries, sugary drinks, things like that, it can help give you a little bit of a break from that and experience what it's like not having to live on such high amounts of sugar, which result in like sugar crashes and sugar spikes and all those things. Okay. Which brings me to my next point, which is blood sugar control. So if you are able to bring the refined carbs down and focus mainly on fibrous carbs, it's a much steadier blood sugar level throughout the entire day. So you don't have these spikes and drops in energy and mood swings and all that stuff that can come with blood sugar going up and down. Next is, it provides a little bit of structure. Some people just have zero structure when it comes to their eating. It's, oh, I'm hungry. Okay, I guess I'll eat. And then it results in going these long periods without food. And then when they finally are hungry, they're not just hungry, they're ravenous, which leads to poor food decisions. And when we have some sort of a structure where it's like, okay, I'm going to reduce my carbohydrate intake, all of a sudden that intention when it comes to the nutrition means, okay, now I'm planning on what the meals are going to be. Because if I'm going to cut carbohydrates or if I'm going to reduce them, I need to think about what I'm actually going to eat compared to what I normally eat. And that intention will start the ball rolling with, okay, I'm going to eat this at this time, that at that time. And it can lead to a lot of positives in that regard. But that's a short-term thing when it comes to cutting carbs completely for all the reasons I just listed. And you should really focus on reincorporating them over time. So kind of like an elimination style diet where you cut them out completely, but then you reintroduce things that serve you better. So like, for example, let's say you do completely cut out carbs, you go like full on keto or full on carnivore, but then you slowly add things in like, okay, now we're going to eat veggies. Okay, now we're going to eat fruits. Awesome. I don't just feel good. I feel better when these things are in the mix. Cool. Now I'm going to add some beans. Now I'm going to add some nuts. Now I'm going to add some whole grains. And all of a sudden you feel like $1,000,000 and you're like, damn, I feel good. And it might have all started with the low carb diet as your kickstart. So that could serve a really good purpose as well. And to top it all off, if we're trying to lose weight, if we're trying to reduce body fat, it does help reduce overall calories as long as we're not replacing those calories with super fatty sources that are high calories. So the thing that a lot of people run into when they do low carbohydrate diets is they find these frankenfoods, these keto friendly foods, which have a ton of saturated fat, or they have a ton of medium chain triglycerides, like the tropical fats. And guess what? Those also will raise your saturated fat, which won't be great. And those come with calories. For anybody who doesn't know, protein and carbs have 4 calories per gram. Fat has 9. So it has more than double the amount of calories that protein and carbs do, which is why these fat sources that feel like nothing carry so many calories and mess a lot of people up when it comes to their diets because they're like, this isn't that much food, but it's that much calories. So it can get in your way. So let's talk about like what normally happens. Like what's the reason that this tends to backfire for people? Because we all know at least one person in our lives, maybe it's you, who's done a low carb diet and it just didn't work out. Maybe it worked in the moment, but all of a sudden you find yourself years later and you're like, well, damn, I'm worse off than when I started. Okay. When it backfires, these are usually the reasons. Number one is when you cut carbs out in those first weeks feels awesome because you're getting a break from your standard diet, usually the standard American diet, which is absolute garbage and it's convenience foods, highly processed, not a lot of nutrients. So you get a break from that and you feel really, really good. And then a couple weeks go by, the honeymoon phase is over, and then the low energy starts to set in. And now when you have less energy, you're moving less throughout the day. So you're taking less steps. You're not moving as much at your desk. You're lowering your non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And then when it comes to your actual energy or your actual exercise, you have less energy to do your workouts. So now you're getting crappier workouts and you're less likely to even do your workouts because of that low energy. Poor strength training performance. Okay. Now, when it comes to endurance stuff like running, you can do pretty well on low carb because you don't exactly need the glycogen for the quick, hard, heavy stuff like strength training. But you do want it in the tank because, again, it is a fuel source. It's awesome to have. And that's why people like before a marathon or a half will like carb up the night before because it is a fuel source. It's great to have. But when it comes to strength training in particular, it can reduce performance or plateau performance, which will possibly result in losing muscle or plateauing in muscle gain. And we want a lot of muscle. We want to improve things like insulin sensitivity because let's say we're doing low carb because it's been shown to improve glycemic control, like blood sugar control for people who are type 2 diabetics. One of the things that type 2 diabetics need the most is muscle because it helps with insulin sensitivity, which is the core of their issue. Is insulin just isn't doing its job because of so much excess body fat and the exposure to highly refined carbohydrates. So now we're losing muscle and making it harder and worsening symptoms possibly. So we don't want that to happen. Poor sleep. So if you do end up bringing your calories really, really low, or let's say you're in that keto flu phase, it can mess up your sleep. And guess what happens when you mess up your sleep? You mess up your hormones. Okay. Now, I say that loosely because you don't actually mess up your hormones. They're just a response to your activities and your behaviors, and they're going to fluctuate in a certain way. But without getting in the weeds on it, we can say loosely it messes up your hormones because the next day you are most likely going to feel more hungry and less full due to your leptin and ghrelin being off. Your leptin, which helps you feel full, is going to be lower. Your ghrelin, which makes you feel hungry, is going to be elevated. And on top of that, your brain is affected in a way where that decision-making center of your brain is fatigued because it hasn't had a full night's sleep. So now you're more likely to make worse food decisions. So that we don't want to have happen. And on top of all that, we usually fall into this cycle of all or nothing, kind of like I talked about before, where it's you're on or off the plan. If you eat one single carbohydrate, you are off the plan. You're a failure. You suck. You are the worst human ever. You are the lowest of the low because you ate a singular carb. Does that sound ridiculous to anybody else? Does that sound insane? Like, guilt is not an ingredient. Shame is not on the food label. Okay. It's too easy to fail with this stuff. Like, you never learn balance or maintenance, and you need to learn that stuff if you want to keep this result long term. So, how do we do this a smart way? How do we make sure that if we do want to experiment with low carb, we do it for the right reasons, we do it in the right way that serves you well and leaves you feeling better and in better health? Number one, prioritize fibrous carbs. If you are going to eat carbs, like, you still, like, true keto does still involve carbohydrates. It's about, I believe, 50 grams or less. If you're going to get that 50 grams, get it from fibrous carbohydrates. Things like I mentioned, the big five: whole grains, legumes, beans and lentils, nuts and seeds, fruits and veggies. Okay. If you can get those, awesome. Use carbs around workouts. So, like, let's say you do want to have a little snack, like a little treat, something sugary. It's not the end of the world, especially if you do it around workouts, because it's going to digest fast, which means you're going to be able to use it during your workouts. So, I mean, fat comes from your total calories for the day being too high. So it's really not going to be that big of a deal in the moment. But if you want to kind of like trick yourself into being like, I promise this is okay, if you eat it around exercise, you will be using that for exercise. Like, it's less likely to turn into fat. So you can use that as a reason to incorporate them without the guilt, and know that it's actually serving you pretty well during exercise. And then there's we also don't want to avoid, or sorry, we want to avoid the extremes. Like, we don't want to cut anything, because anytime you cut a specific macronutrient, protein, carbs, or fat, you are going to miss out on certain things. Like, you will create deficiencies because you are now missing out on something that is carrying these essential things for our body. Now, people say carbs are non-essential, which, fair, but if you want to live a high quality of life, if you want to be able to eat cultural foods, if you want to feel your absolute best, not just survive, but actually feel your best, then it usually involves some carbohydrates. Okay. And when it comes to the fat loss, when it comes to trying to improve your body composition, if you need to lose weight, think deficit and strength training, not eliminating carbs. Okay. And also cardio in there as well, just to make sure you feel energized throughout the whole thing. So at the end of the day, we want to achieve that deficit, and that can happen in a multitude of different ways. You don't just have to do low carb. You can do it through Mediterranean dieting. You could do it through whatever diet you can think of. You could do it through the Twinkie diet, the pizza diet. You'll probably feel like crap, but the deficits work. If you want a good example, if after you're done listening to this, go and Google the Kansas State professor that famously did the Twinkie diet, where he lost weight eating nothing but junk food and his blood markers improved. So at the end of the day, deficit is really the name of the game when it comes to losing weight and achieving that result. So in conclusion, okay, just don't eliminate. Substitute fibrous sources if you want to do anything. Like, if you don't want to completely cut all these foods out of your life, substitution is always going to serve you better than elimination. So if you want, try whole grain bread or sprouted bread instead of white, brown rice instead of white, like simple changes like that. Throw some beans in there, throw some avocado, get these fibrous sources that slow down the digestion of foods, so that when you do have those carbs and those sugars that they break down into hitting your bloodstream, it's not a spike. It's nice and balanced because we've got fiber in there. And then if you also include protein and fat, that also will slow down the absorption of those sugars. So again, you'll get a nice steady level throughout the day, and you'll have that sustained energy rather than those peaks and crashes throughout the day. And then The goal is not restriction. It's preserving muscle, supporting energy, and staying consistent. Okay. So I'll let you like chew on that, like let it marinate, let it simmer, and that'll be that for today. Okay. Now I know I threw a lot at you. That was a lot, and kind of went deep on certain things. And if you have any questions, I'm always here for you. You could always reach out to me on the socials or whatever. But if you heard this and you're like, that sounds really great, but I just need somebody to tell me just do this, like that's literally what I do. I literally make recipe books for clients and say, I know you like eating this, eat it this way. Or when it comes to the training aspect, I'll be like, listen, I know you want to build muscle, just do what I put on the program for you. And they're like, got it. It's mindless, it's easy, and you got somebody teaching you the way. And if you want to learn more and be able to do it yourself, I also do that as well. So it's a learning process. It's not just getting the fish, you're also learning to fish. So if you're interested in that and you want to see what it's about, go ahead and click the link down in the description or the show notes, wherever you're watching or listening, and let's set up an intro call. I'll tell you about everything I do, whether it's in person or online, and we'll get to chatting and see if it's right for you. And if it is, we'll get you going ASAP and start changing your life. And worst case scenario, if it's not, I got a lot of friends in the industry. I can refer you to a whole lot of people. So if you're on the fence, just sign up for the call. It's free, no commitment required. And I'd love to talk to you just as a podcast listener. So that being said, that's it for today. Thank you so much. I'll see you next time. But until then, go kick some ass. Bye-bye.